The short one smelt like, well, not nice. He was called Chas Smealy. "Well, Chas," said Bantam Frog. "Well, Mr. Frog," said Chas Smealy. His hand flew out of the snatched off Dad's hat. "Just as we thought, Mr. Frog. Flaming gorillas." "Monkeys, Chas, monkeys," corrected Bantam Frog. "From that monkey land place, no doubt. But these are no ordinary monkeys, Chas. Look at them, pretending to be human. I expect they can understand what we say, too." "You'd best open the van doors, Chas." Chas Smealy grinned as he opened the doors. "Doors opened, Mr. Frog," he said. "Good." And to us Bantam Frog said, "Listen to me, you monkey chops. You're coming with us. There's a little job I want you to do." And we climbed inside the van, feeling very small and frightened. Chapter 6. A Second Burglary. The back of the van had no windows, so we couldn't see where we were going. It was very bumpy. Chas Smealy drove fast and said a lot of bad words about other drivers. Then the van slowed right down. It felt as if we were sneaking up to some place where we shouldn't be. Then it stopped. Chas Smealy turned off the engine, and Bantam Frog looked back at us. His smile was friendly as a shark. "Now listen, you monkey chaps," he said, smiling. "I want you two big monkeys to do the job for us. Here's what I want you to do. This is Hambourne Hall, a big house full of lovely, expensive things. I want you to climb up and get in through the top window." He went on. "Then I want you to start collecting up some of those lovely things. Collect as many as you can and bring them back to Miss and Mr. Smealy. We'll be waiting here ready to fill our sacks." Chas Smealy turned around, and the smell of him seemed to get stronger. "And just so you don't try any monkey business like escaping, we'll keep the two little monkeys in the van." He grinned safely. Mum looked at Dad for the second time in one night. A spot of burglary was to be done. But this was proper burglary. Chas Smealy and Bantam Frog meant to keep everything for themselves. Poor Mum and Dad, there was nothing they could do about it. The van doors opened and they slowly climbed out. "We'll be back soon," said Mum. She looked so worried. Then they were gone. "Oh, Sandy!" wailed Jem, jumping up and down. "Quiet in there," hissed Chas Smealy, "or I'll make you two into a pair of furry mittens." We stood up on our back legs and looked over the front seats and through the windscreen. There was a big house, and Bantam Frog was pointing up at one of its dark windows. We saw Dad and Mum take off their shoes, then they began to climb up the drainpipe. After that I couldn't bear to look. I turned away, and when I did, I saw something that made me whoop with joy. "Don't do that," said Jem angrily. "But Jem, look!" I pointed with my paw. "It's a key," said Jem. "Haven't keys got us into enough trouble tonight?" "But that's not a door key," he said. "It's a key to start up the engine." "I know, because I've watched humans in the car park. If we can drive this thing, we can go and get help." "And you reckon you can drive it, Jem?" asked excitedly. "Of course," I said, even though I wasn't really that sure. And the next moment I was sitting in the driving seat, clutching the steering wheel with my paws, all four of them. Chapter 7. In the driving seat. It was then that I found found out that vans are not made for monkeys to drive. I couldn't see out the windscreen. Jem would have to give me directions. She would also have to stand on the pedals to make the van go or stop. I explained to Jem how the pedals work. Brake, accelerator, she repeated. It was crowded in the driving seat. Jem had to stand on tiptoe and put her head out of the side window to see. Ready, I said. I suppose so, she said. I turned the key. The engine came alive. Accelerator, I shouted at Jem. Suddenly we were rushing forward. Outside I could hear Bantam Fogg and Chas Smealy snarling. Their running feet crunched on the gravel as they chased after us. Bam! We hit the statue and knocked off its head. Which way, Jem? I hollered. Left, she cried. Baff! A different statue lost both its arms. Sorry, I meant right. We clipped a tree and the main gatepost before we were back on the road. Luckily, we had left Bantam Fogg and Chas Smealy far behind. After a mile or two, Jem and I became much better. A team, you might say. I began to feel proud of myself, but the van must have looked very odd, as if it were driving itself. Certainly that was what it looked like to P.C. Duffel. He was parked in a side street, eating a sandwich. He shook his head. Nah, must be the trick of light, he told himself as we drove by. Following the signs, we came in sight of Monkeyland. Jem was so excited she forgot to say one small important word. Brake. Crash! We went right through the gates and ended up outside Mr. Otterbank's house. A light went on. A window flew open and Mr. Otterbank's head poked out. It's a van, he said, turning it to Mrs. Otterbank, who was in bed with the quilt pulled up to her chin. Blow me, Sandy and Jem have just climbed out, and Sandy is writing something with his paw in the dirt beside the van. Let me see. Help! Mum and Dad, prisoners at Hambourne Hall. Come quickly. I'd better go and see what this is all about. It was then that he had discovered all of his clothes had gone. Every drawer and cupboard empty, he wailed. Luckily, Mrs. Otterbank remembered that there was something he could wear. Something Mr. Otterbank had worn at a fancy dress party last New Year's Eve. Chapter 8. 2 Mean Monkeys and 1 Mad Gorilla. Jem and me both screamed when a big, hairy gorilla stepped out of Mr. Otterbank's house. It's only me, said Mr. Otterbank's muffled voice. Quickly, back inside the van, both of you. No, I'll drive if you don't mind. He reversed the van past the shattered gates, and we were off again. Meanwhile, P.C. Duffel had finished his sandwich and was eating an ice bun. He thought, isn't that the white van that looked like it didn't have a driver? I'll look more carefully this time, and so he did. That's all right, he said with a sigh of relief. There's a gorilla at the wheel. A gorilla? A second later, a half-eaten ice bun was tossed aside. Blue lights flashed and a siren wailed. I tugged at Mr. Otterbank's sleeve, and Mr. Otterbank glanced in the mirror. No time to stop now, Sandy, he said, and he rushed until he reached Hambourne Hill. In the headlights we saw Bantam Fogg and Chas Smealy. Mum and Dad were filling open sacks with treasure from the house. They all looked surprised when the van screeched to a halt and a gorilla sprang out with 2 mean-looking monkeys on either side of him. Hold it right there, cried Mr. Otterbank. Hold it yourself, cried Bantam Fogg, throwing a sack of treasure at him. A big fight started. Gorilla and Monkeys against Burglars, and then PC Duffel arrived. He climbed out his patrol car looking very confused. He decided to arrest the gorilla for speeding. But when he got him in a headlock, Mr. Otterbank's mask came off. That was too much for PC Duffel. He was so shocked that he fainted. Outnumbered now 5-2, Bantam Frog and Chas Smealy were quickly defeated. Mum and Dad sat on them, and Mr. Otterbank ran to get some rope from the van to tie them up. "Even been made of a monkey of," said Mr. Otterbank cheerily. Chas Smealy used some more of his bad words, but he really didn't know quite few. With the help of Mum and Dad, Mr. Otterbank put Bantam Frog and Chas Smealy into the patrol car with a note, which read, "Arrest these two villains. They use innocent monkeys as burglars. Me and Jem put the treasure nearby for evidence." Mr. Otterbank said, "Now, let's get out of here before that policeman comes to his senses." Nobody had been told twice. We jumped into the van, and Mr. Otterbank drove off. He didn't say much as he drove. It seemed like he was busy thinking, and when he saw lots of little fingers in badly fitting shoes and clothes hurrying back to Monkeyland, he slowed down and became even more thoughtful. He stopped outside his house and turned to Dad. "Otis," he said, "I am going back to bed. Please make sure that all things you borrowed are left on my doorstep, and the keys too. Good night." And he went inside. "Well," said Mum, surprised, "I thought he'd be more cross than that." Chapter 9. What did Mr. Otterbank do next? Next morning in Monkeyland was pretty much like any other, as far as the visitors were concerned, but for the monkeys there were a lot of stories to be swapped, and everyone wondered what Mr. Otterbank would do. Clifton Mope said he expected Mr. Otterbank would build an electric fence. Jem's friend Crystal said it was more likely he would dig a moat and fill it with crocodiles. But I knew Mr. Otterbank wasn't like that at all. I was right. About a week later, several big plastic bags of old clothes appeared by the tire tree, and on a twig was a newly cut set of keys and a note which said, "Use these wisely." Of course, a meeting had to be held about what this might mean. Everyone gathered at the tire tree. Milton Grizzlefur sat high up in his tire, scratching himself and waiting for silence. At last he began to speak. "Mr. Otterbank is the best human who ever lived," he told us. "He realizes that we are not ordinary monkeys. He knows we need to see outside the world from time to time, and it looks like he's given us permission to do so. But listen to me, monkeys. We have to be much more careful in future." "You can say that again," I muttered. Later, I went for a nap in my favourite tree. "You know," I thought to myself as I was falling asleep, "the outside world, all right, but yawn, really there is no place like home." Now that I've finished the end of the book, go to the beginning and read it again yourself. If you want, you can rewind this video and listen to me read it again, or you can listen to it on the audio button down here. Boys and girls, you should be finished reading your book by now and on to your Kahoot quiz. You can access Kahoot by typing it into Google kahoot.it, or you can download it from the App Store. Your Kahoot pin for your first quiz is 0795034. Then press enter. So boys and girls, this is what your quiz will look like on Kahoot. All you need to do is enter your name, press OK Go, and complete the quiz. Don't forget to send us your pictures to show us that you've completed it. Enjoy and have fun!